Okay, welcome to the video that will help you complete the carbohydrate intake worksheet. So you can see here I've got the worksheet pulled up in Microsoft Word. I have chronometer up here on Chrome, and then I have a calculator. You may be able to do this without a calculator. I am not great at mental math, and so cannot. That is up to you. So let's get started. Highly recommend that you go back to the video that describes how to adjust your chronometer settings, and then back again to the video that describes how to create the nutrition report before doing this. But we are going to create the nutrition report to start this video as well, just because it's so important and so many people get it wrong. So you can see here, I'm just in the diary portion of chronometer. So this is the home screen. I've added 3 days worth of food. And then I'm going to go to trends. Note that these 3 days are within the last 7 days. That is important for what we're doing right now. So I'm going to go to trends and choose nutrition report. And what you'll see here are the calorie summary. You can ignore this. We aren't going to talk about this for these assignments. The macronutrient targets, this is an important section of the screen that we'll use a lot. And then down here are all the other nutrients in a little bit more specific detail. So we'll go through those as well. Okay, so I'm looking up here at macronutrient targets to begin with to fill out my average energy intake table. And note that this is an average because what Chronometer has done is taken an average of what you've eaten for the past 3 days and charted in Chronometer. So it's not just 1 day, and that's why we do the 3-day intake. 3-day intake is a little more representative of a pattern than 1 day. It's not the best measure, but 3 days is certainly better than 1 day. So here we are. And you can see over here on this yellow bar, the top bar is energy or calorie intake. So the first number is what you actually ate. The second number is your recommendation. And then the percentage behind that is the percentage of the recommendation that you ate. So for those of you who struggle a bit with math, this is a really good key. If what you actually ate is more than the recommendation, then your percentage should be over 100. If what you actually ate is less than the recommendation, then this percentage will be less than 100. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to pull this information into my table. My energy recommendation was 1,446 calories. My actual intake was 1,750 calories on average. So that was 121% of the recommendation. And then I would go ahead and enter this answer these questions here. So just make sure there's a space. I'd like your answers not to be bolded because it's easier for me to grade. And make sure to answer each part of the question fully and completely. So then we'll go down to average carbohydrate intake. And again, you can pull that from this macronutrient targets section. The carbohydrates are listed here in the blue bar. And I'm just going to move it over a little bit so I can see it better when we're looking at the worksheet. All right, so my recommended carbohydrate intake was 180.8 grams. So you go ahead and round that up to 181 grams. The AMDR for carbohydrates is something that we talked about in class and something that we had talked about in other sections as well. So I'm going to let you fill that in. Acceptable macronutrient distribution range, for those of you who are a little confused. Then first I'm going to enter my intake in grams. So I'm going to go back over to this blue macronutrient distribution or macronutrient target bar, and I'm going to look at this first number, 175.3. 0.3 grams of carbohydrate is not important. I'm just going to go ahead and put 175 grams of carbohydrate. Now I need to convert my grams of carbohydrate intake into calories. Hopefully, those of you who've been paying attention know that there are 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So I'm going to take 175 times 4, 700 calories eaten on average over those 3 days from carbohydrates. Okay, now this part is the next piece of math. And what you need to do here is figure out what percentage of your total calories consumed came from carbohydrate. And that can be done by dividing your intake in carbohydrates in calories by your total calorie intake. So in my case, I'm going to divide 700 by 1750, which brings me to 0.4. And if I take that times 100, then I get 40%. So 40% of the calories of my calories consumed on average over that 3-day period, which I'm not going to lie, this isn't my actual diet. I just sort of picked things for the purposes of making this video. But we'll pretend 40% of my consumed calories were from carbohydrates. So in this section of the worksheet, you'll need to write yes or no. Was basically looking back to what the acceptable macronutrient distribution range is for carbohydrates. Did your calorie consumption from carbohydrates fall within that range? And you'll have to do a little bit of evaluation. So we'll move on to this fiber portion here. To find the answer or find the data that you need for this, you're going to look at the carbohydrate table. And you can see here that this is your intake of fiber underneath carbohydrates, because fiber is a carbohydrate. That's why it's tabbed over a little bit. Carbohydrates is the bigger category. So this is your gram intake of fiber. So we can go ahead and put that here. 36.9, I'm going to round up to 37 grams. And now you need to do a little bit of backwards math to figure out your recommended fiber intake. So I can see here that it says I consumed 36.9 grams of fiber, which is 148% of my recommended fiber intake. So we'll clear this out, and I will take 36.9 divided by 1.48, because 1.48 is the numeric way to say a percentage. If it's a 2-digit percentage, like 80%, then you would just say 0.8. That equals 24.9. So I'm going to round that up and say that my fiber recommendation was 25 grams per day. Next, this question I can help you out with a little bit. Please do make sure that that your answers are not bolded. It's just so much easier for me to grade. So what were your top 5 carbohydrate sources? Well, Chronometer can answer that for you. So we're going to go back to this macronutrient targets section, and you'll notice that as I hover over these percentage bars, that little window will pop up. So if we hover over the carbohydrate bar, excuse me, you'll see that there is a list of foods and you'll see those percentages that are on that list. So that tells you what percentage of your carbohydrate intake came from each of these foods. So for what I was charting for those 3 days, brown rice, a smoothie, cooked cabbage, example, which was a recipe that I titled in class as example. I really couldn't tell you what it is. And cowpeas cooked from dried were my highest carbohydrate sources. So I'm just going to type those right over here. Brown rice, smoothie, example, cowpeas. What was the other thing? I can't remember. Oh, cabbage. So eating a lot of cabbage to have it be that much of my carbohydrate intake. So that's all you have to do for this one. And then the rest of these questions are mostly just reflection on your carbohydrate and your fiber intake. Number 6, what food sources of fiber did you consume? You can do the same thing over here. So pull up chronometer, hover over the bar that tells you what percentage of your fiber recommendation you consumed, and then it will tell you. So I consumed a lot of food sources of fiber. So ideally you would list all of those there. And if it's something kind of obscure like meal makeover marinara sauce, pork stir fry, so those are recipes that I entered. And I would expect that you would write unbolded meal makeover marinara recipe, pork stir fry recipe. And then I think I had cabbage, avocado, I don't know, some other things. But in this section, I really do want you to list all of the food sources of fiber you consumed. The carbohydrate piece, you only need to list your top 5 sources. And then here in this section, what 2 specific actions can you take? I'm looking for I will eat more something that has fiber, or I will substitute something that has fiber for something that does not. So that is how you do the worksheet. Please email me if you have any questions or concerns. I will see you tomorrow.